Hey guys, welcome to the Operation Show. This is Jared. I'm the founder and CEO of Luminous, and we're at episode 3. So on episode 3, I'm inviting in my head of implementation, Josh Sanders. Josh, can you introduce yourself real fast?
Yeah, I come from a background of e-commerce ops. Got a lot of family members that are owners and operators of different brands. So I know what it looks like.
In this episode, we're going to be diving into what we did when we implemented Obvi. So first, Josh and I are going to talk about the importance of implementation and onboarding when it comes to implementing a operating system or a system of record. Then we're going to dive in with Josh B from Obvi upstairs. We're going to go over how after implementation, what his flows look like before and after Luminous. Why is onboarding or implementation so important? When we take a look at legacy ERPs like NetSuite and Acumatica, there's, one of the crucial points in a brand's history is that decision to implement or onboard a system of record. What does onboarding or implementation mean to you now that you've onboarded hundreds of brands?
Yeah, so important in the sense of there's studies around that there's that 75 to 80% of ERP onboardings fail. So it can be difficult, but I'd say onboarding and implementation truly sets the stage for how successful you're going to be during the entire relationship with a SaaS company or a partner. So in onboarding, typically you go through these different phases with data gathering, setting up the structure of your account, and connecting up integrations with all of your different other tech providers. And then it's a lot of in the weeds training, understanding workflows, and just getting everyone confident with the system.
Something we talk about a lot behind the scenes is in implementation, these brands, we actually just hold up a big mirror on their operations and you get to see it for what it is. And something that we talk about all the time is implementation is so important because it's the ultimate test of, can you get the features in the software to match with real world SOPs, like real actions in the real world, showing the brand exactly what their operations look like in a critical way. Sometimes that brings up uncomfortable discussions. Maybe their operations weren't as quite, it wasn't all rainbows and butterflies. They were maybe looking at their operations with rose-colored glasses on. And I think the ERP forces a lot of conversations that up until that point, you haven't had those conversations.
Well, I think it shines a light on, we've talked about this before, it shines a light on individuals as well with maybe they're not handling things properly or there's different inefficiencies, if you will. So oftentimes there's uncomfortable conversations that are had with, oh, why are you doing it this way? Have you tried it this way? And there's a lot of constructive feedback that goes on in implementation in order to kind of grab these efficiencies out and how do we fix things.
We run into a lot of brands who they might have evolved as a brand on top of a inferior SOP in QuickBooks. So for example, the proper way to actually take an order to completion is to write the sales order first. From that master sales order, you can generate a pick list and you can invoice from that. The payment attaches to the invoice itself. Brands might grow up just doing everything off of an invoice. Like they treat the invoice as everything.
Yep.
And they might come to us and like, why doesn't Luminous have the bins on the invoices? And it's like, well, what? Oh, you're trying to get a packing slip, which comes from the sales order. So it's main discussions like that where a lot of times you rub up against egos because you're telling them like, hey, like you're doing this in a very non-standard way. Like that's okay, no shame there. But like, here's how companies typically do that.
Yeah.
So how difficult is it having those conversations?
Well, I think I'd say to sum it up, most brands, they get to where they want to be by just doing something as quickly as possible, right?
Within the confines of their
confines of an existing system, which a lot of times is Google Sheets or QuickBooks, ShipStation. So like things that lack like a true system of record or like a transactional history, they can just go in and do things as quickly as possible. So usually it's really all about setting expectations. And again, this can be uncomfortable for people where it's like, hey, if you want to do things quick and like messy and you run the risk of messing up or really not keeping track of like your cost of goods sold correctly, that can be uncomfortable for brands when you say, hey, let's actually standardize this a little bit more, or let's make a little bit of a switch, right? Luckily, we take the approach in implementation is like, we want to be flexible and work with you in your workflows. But at some point, if you want to get specific type of reporting or different granularity on where inventory is moving, you have to make those changes. And there's usually a learning curve. There's a little bit of uncomfort that goes on there.
As we've built out the implementation and account management team here at Luminous, what are some of the guiding principles that you focused on while building this team out?
So, I mean, I'd say we want to take the approach of like, we are on your team. So really want the collaborative approach of working with the client and getting them solutions. I think when you're working with a vendor or a tech provider, I think oftentimes you often have the attitude where it's like, hey, this is like your fault, like pointing fingers and like having issues with that. No, let's come together. Let's express concerns openly and questions, but let's work together. We're on the same team here to roll out the solutions that we need. It's either outsourced or it's kind of handled really hands off. So we wanted to take the approach that we are in this with you and we genuinely care that you have a good experience. And that's what drives me day in and day out, is how do we make this onboarding process the very best experience that we can make it for brands? Because I've been there before, working at a brand, like put in a ticket request through email, don't hear back for a week or two, can't get any help when I'm actually trying to run a business. That's where we want to be different.
Before we move upstairs, if you had to give brands one piece of advice before they start an implementation of a system, whether that's Luminous or anything else, what would you tell them?
The one actionable piece of advice is you must have an internal champion on your side. It becomes extremely difficult if you don't have a clear owner on the brand side, because then you lose traction on things, tasks don't get done efficiently. So I'd say that's the number one thing. If you are looking to implement a system, have that internal discussion, make sure that you have a Luminous champion, for example, that we can communicate with and you're ready to rock with.
Okay guys, so we're sitting here with Josh and Josh. Let's do a quick recap of the operations flow that we went over last episode. So again, this is just zooming out on their operations as a whole.
So as you can see, Obvi's got a lot going on in their operations. We classify them as a modern multi-warehouse brand, where beginning of implementation, we mapped out all their different co-packers, all their different sales channels, as well as all of their distribution points and how they fulfill their sales orders. So as you can see here, one of the trickiest parts of implementation is getting all of these connections to make sense. So you can see Obvi does a lot of work direct to consumer through Shopify. They also do a lot through Amazon, multiple different marketplaces, and are rapidly expanding into B2B as well. So this is one of the most important parts, also can be extremely tricky, which we'll touch on a little bit more later. Another part that can be tricky is pulling in all the inventory data from all warehouses and 3PLs. We'll touch on this later. It can be extremely difficult working with 3PLs that have proprietary systems that they custom made in their garage. It can be tough. One of the most important flows to go through early on in implementation is how raw goods get purchased and distributed across the supply chain. Obvi is similar to other CPG brands where they purchase labels from one spot, purchase raw materials from another, and use a variety of different co-packers, where managing all the inventory becomes key to supply chain success. When we implement a new brand, we go through the same 5 phases in implementation. Phase number 1 entails data gathering.
So what were some of the challenges that you guys went through on stage 1, like this data gathering, creating a product catalog? Did Obvi have an official product catalog?
To put short, we had one, but it wasn't a truthful product catalog. When I look at like the catalog that we reference, it's pretty much that garage 3PL's catalog that they made for us, and you don't really realize all of the alternate SKUs and how they're a completely different set of SKUs for Amazon FBA, and that SKU is also the same for RJW, but it's also different based on if it's a case or if it's individual, and kind of pulling all those into one. It really is like, at least we had 300 SKUs, we probably have like near 1,000. And then you get kits, and it's like, oh my God, like every kit's a different SKU, and that kit's a different SKU on Amazon. It's such a headache, but it was definitely, it was tough.
How long did it take to get the product catalog and some of the foundational data dialed?
Honestly, since you guys backpulled orders, like just going through purgatory, that probably cleared up like 80 to 90% of it. Like in the past, like we just started with Amazon in-house back in February of 2024. So we had like some of the data, but I didn't even know about those alternate SKUs. So like it was there, and you walked me through like, okay, this is purgatory. This is like a SKU that's not being recognized, and like I wouldn't have recognized it myself. And you kind of just go and build your way up and shrink the list down, but it's ongoing.
So Josh, can you show us what did it look like pre-Luminous, like your like a central repository of all your products and SKUs?
This is exactly what it was. It was a linked sheet. This is coming directly from our like custom 3PL, and they made a Google sheet. I could honestly tell you a couple nightmares, but this is pretty much what our catalog was. This was all of our SKUs all the way back to 2019. Even if we aren't selling them anymore, like this is a recipe book from Black Friday 2020. This is, I've never even heard of this, but we have negative 400 units. It was just kind of like a scrambled mess, and there's no way that like I couldn't just go like, I can't even type in it. There was no way to add new SKUs. It's kind of just like what they gave us is what our central truth was. So like this is definitely one of our heroes, but we have thousands of units at flat fee. We just put in like 2 massive orders, so it's good to know those are coming. We have it in Walmart, FBA, kind of all over the place. And so I guess kind of to showcase what we have on hand, showing that like 4,456, if you look back here to kind of our old truth, it's like, oh, we had 4,300, but in reality we actually have around like 14,000 or 10,000, or however many it is, like 14,000 units.
Let's do a purgatory real fast on there. I'll show. Yeah, it's not. So this is purgatory. So people will, dirty purgatory. When you actually start using a product catalog, where you start caring about every single line item of data has to be mapped to an actual SKU. Yep. This is the point of purgatory. So even like you can see one of the orders came in May 6th, and there was a SKU right there that hasn't been added. Yep. Because it's impossible to you guys add new products and new SKUs all the time because you sell across so many channels. So like there has to be something to just flag and then allow you to add that SKU and then resync it.
Completely. And I think this is a separate Shopify store, but we weren't tracking the SKU on that Shopify store yet. So
exactly.
I obviously we'll dive into it later, but kind of like the SKU mapping on a Shopify store level is big.
Phase number 2, integrations and connections. So one of the biggest things here is Obvi has multiple different Shopify channels. So if you're a brand selling across multiple Shopifys, doing like a mix of B2B or any other plethora of options here, we can connect to as many Shopify channels as you want, as well as integrating with sales channels like Amazon, Walmart, TikTok, other popular ones like that. And then you'll see there are 3PLs here as well, where we're all in inventory, and then again, we're able to push sales orders, other documents as well, to make sure that everything's cohesive. Phase number 3, training. One of the biggest hurdles to implementing like a system of record is just comfort level, getting through that learning curve, because there's always going to be changes, and there's most likely going to be a little bit of turbulence during the system. So being intentional about training and reaching out when you have questions is always key. And we're super committed to make sure that that happens. The system gets adopted and everyone feels comfortable using it. I usually say it's not going to be a matter if you have questions, but when you have questions. And so we typically, and like we did with Obvi, set up Slack channels, unlimited training time. I think we hopped on calls 2 or 3 times a week.
Yeah.
Just to make sure you were comfortable with all the different flows in the system.
My main step would be hit the Slack channel, whether I was reaching out to Josh, Brian, Jared. Even the other day, we wanted to make a purchase order be in a different currency, and you get a respond within, I don't know, I'd say a minute. They're really fast. If that doesn't work, obviously I have some of their personal numbers so I can shoot a text. And then lastly, I would just go to the direct help thing, and you can hop on a video, you can start chat with pretty much anybody.
Phase number 4, inventory and go live checklist. So once training's done, we went through like a go live checklist like we do with all of our other clients, validating the data, just making sure that there's no outstanding questions with any of the workloads or anything like that. We'll really start taking advantage of these different reports with forecasting, inventory, some of these other sales reports, and financial reports like getting inventory valuation, cost of goods sold, different things like that the accountants love. And then at that point, you're about 80-90% of the way there, and we're committed to getting all the way to 100%. I usually tell people it's like Kobe Bryant, and after they won the Western Conference Finals, they asked about his celebration. He said, "Job's not finished." Job's not finished. So that's our approach here as well, is adding on kind of like tier 2 features and support and automating workflows as well. And then phase number 5, go live and account management.
What do you think is the biggest difference now looking at your operations through the lens of Luminous?
I think prior to creating Obvi's like system of record and having that consistent truth, it was a lot of looking at what was around me to try to find an answer, and I wasn't really comfortable like with my data. I would have to go and open 10 tabs, look at different websites, different sales channels, different 3PLs, and I was kind of reliant on them to make a decision. And now I have kind of full control of all of our data, and I have one source of truth, and I can actually make informed decisions on my own rather than relying on somebody else. I'm definitely looking forward to making a forecast using this data and actually leveraging everything that's at hand. I think one of my favorite things in the world is automating. It started out as Google Sheets, but making a forecast within Luminous that can automatically notify our 3PLs, all of our team members, Ron, Robbie, the CEO, CFO, and be like, hey, we're gonna run out of this by this point, and we need to put in a new order.
All right, that wraps up episode 3 of the Operations Show. I hope you guys got a lot of value in seeing what Luminous focuses on for brands to get successfully implemented into a system of record. I hope you stick around for episode 4, where we're going to go over the results of Obvi's implementation and how different their operations look using an operating system like Luminous. Thanks, guys.